Michael, welcome. Thank you for being here as always.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, pal. Merry Christmas. And I wanted to ask you first about something that you watch quite closely, and that is the number of congressional seats that fall to the Democrats and a number of congressional seats that fall to the Republicans, and the critical nature, and you've made this point repeatedly, in that the numbers really matter when it comes to getting stuff done in Washington. So you can have whatever agenda you want as a president and as an administration, but if you don't have those numbers, you're not going to get as much done. Another seat fell for the Democrats. So now, and I believe, and maybe you can give us the sort of the state of the state on this, also with some of these congressional Congress people going to the administration, the number of GOP Congress people has dwindled even more. So now their thin margin is even thinner. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. When you said we should talk about something you watch very closely, I thought, oh, great, we're doing a segment on the NHL network.
Sorry, yeah, that was a bait and switch. Yeah,
it really was. It was exciting for a moment. So what you have is John Duarte, a Republican representative, lost his race by a razor thin in the hundreds of votes in California, around the Salinas area of California, to Adam Gray, an assemblyman there in California. And so that brought the final tally to 220 to 215.
Because Gray is a Democrat, you're saying?
Gray's a Democrat, yeah. Gray's a Democrat and Duarte. So really what undid the Democrats in many ways was the state of Pennsylvania this time around, because there were three Democratic members who lost their seats as incumbents to Republicans there on the same day that Donald Trump won that state in the presidential race. So it's really, it was where the Democrats had a real chance to make a stand. I rated it as House, White House, Senate in terms of what the Democrats' chances of holding on to any of them were. Of course, they lost all three. But the House is still very, very thin. And Matt Gaetz has resigned from Congress. So we go into the next term officially at 219, 215. But Elise Stefanik is going to be the United Nations ambassador to the United Nations. So there we go to 218, 215. And Michael Waltz is going to be a national security advisor. So you go to 217. That's a 2-vote margin. It will get back up to 220 because in all three of those cases, least likely in Stefanik, but still very likely, they're going to be replaced by Republicans. But there will be several months, 2-3 months, really 3 or 4 months before there is an election, special elections in New York and in Florida, and so, look, it's going to be a situation where the Republicans, Mike Johnson's only going to be able to lose two votes, and that changes everything there. But again, that's small. It's a small consolation for Democrats.
Sure. But I wonder if you can just then just a quick follow up then on that. We see this GOP as walking in lockstep, but when you talk about the slim margins and you kind of speak to the fact that it might be a bit of a sweat as to whether or not they can actually get things passed, is that because that coalition isn't as strong in lockstep as we think it is on the GOP side?
Well, I mean, they're more in lockstep than they were because they have the White House, and it's pretty clear, if this were the case going into, say, the last speaker elections, you'll recall with Kevin McCarthy and Mike Johnson and whomever else at that time, that there was a very difficult road for them. It just took a couple of defections to even elect a speaker. They are unified now behind Mike Johnson as speaker. But it will come up when there are votes that need to be taken on issues that matter to a small number of people. So, look, you could say that, hey, let's do an omnibus spending bill on defense. Well, that sounds great to the Republicans, but if you're a Republican and part of that is going to be cutting a base or cutting a supply in a house in your district, then you might not vote for it, and that one vote that you lose is drastic. And so That's where it can come into play. The other thing, Mark, and it's not going to happen immediately, but we're going to have to get used to, Republicans are going to have to get used to the fact that Donald Trump will be a lame duck when he takes office. And what's going to happen? People in the Republican Party are going to try and set themselves apart from the crowd. They're going to go against this White House on occasion to get noticed, to get to earn points both with their constituencies, but also build different in-house caucuses and in-house constituencies that set themselves apart. People start running for the next election right away. And that may mean leaving Donald Trump on certain issues. And that might be hard for people to imagine. It's not pie in the sky. This is just the way politics work. And you've seen it with every departing second-term president.
This is fascinating because we see Trump as sort of an unstoppable political figure, I think, on some level. And so to hear you say people will deliberately part with him as they face elections in their district, it seems almost inconceivable because they're up against this guy who's going to call them out, bully them, smear them.
That's going to happen, but his currency is going to diminish in value, and it's hard again to imagine that. And I'm not talking about somebody who's just going to go up against Donald Trump. This is not going to be a big wave thing that's going to happen generally. He is still very popular. He just won a national election. He won the popular vote. He's popular within his own party by leaps and bounds. But as time goes on, and not immediately, there is going to be a weariness of Donald Trump on behalf of Republicans. And Republicans, especially in the Senate, are going to go up against the administration in different ways so as to set themselves apart, so as to say, yeah, when I'm running for president, I don't have the charisma of Donald Trump, because very few have within our party. But when I get out there, I'm going to explain to voters on the left and in the middle why I voted against Donald Trump on this issue, et cetera. So it's really burnishing their own credentials in a way, but also in order to do that, they have to go against the administration.
In the confirmation process that we're hearing about for some of these insanely controversial nominees, there's one, I'll get to Hegseth in a second, but Tulsi Gabbard, it's now being talked about that her hearings and the hearings around her confirmation should be behind closed doors because it does involve intelligence and sensitivities. And Gabbard, of course, associated with sitting down with Assad in Syria. She's been viewed as, if not a willing asset, sort of an unwitting Russian asset. I mean, again, you can maybe separate the rhetoric from what is actually substantively the case or what evidence there might be. But to the point, is this typical to have these closed-door hearings for a nominee like Tulsi Gabbard?
Yeah, there's precedent for it, a little bit of precedent, but not a ton. And I don't think it should. I mean, look, in the big picture, yes, let's have transparency and let's have people see this. But they've also become a spectacle and a show, these confirmation hearings, which in one sense is good, and in the other sense kind of demeans the process a little bit, because what you should be able to do is trust senators. You know, you're going to know how they voted on certain nominees. That the vote won't be in question. How they get to that vote, you know, I think in some cases there may be reasons not to do it. I don't know. But look, there's always a benefit of the doubt that's given to the president who is nominating people here. And already you've seen the benefit of that doubt. You mentioned Hegseth, but it's not just Hegseth, it's Gabbard. It was Gates. There's Kash Patel. There are lots of names that have come up where people are saying, I don't know about that. And people from within his own party. Now, there are a lot of people who say that almost as a reflex and then vote with the president, which is likely what will happen. So they kind of flirt with you and then they go home by themselves. And so I think that's what's going on here with some of these. So having one behind closed doors, it's not a terrible experiment, perhaps, for the process.
To your point, the reality is that most presidents get their nominees, in large measure, they get them. So even though this is viewed by many as this rogues gallery, it may be that most of them make it through.
Yeah, and the ones that don't, they know that sort of ahead of time. And as in the case of Matt Gaetz and others before him, they withdraw their name from consideration rather than have the president suffer the embarrassment of having one of his people voted down, which, you know, either way, it eliminates them from that position.
Do you remember a nominee like Pete Hegseth who had his mother go on television to talk about what a good guy he is to try to push through his appointment? Has that ever happened before?
I've never seen a mother. I mean, I've seen mothers get involved. I've seen Lillian Carter talk about how great her son Jimmy was, and Barbara Bush talk about how upset she is that George is being pushed around. George, her son George was being pushed around. But I don't think I've ever seen one be an advocate. But you've seen wives, and it's odd. But they invited her on, and she went, and that might have been part of the, let's make him look better. He's got a mom. He's not this horrible person that he's being made out to be. But senators see through that a little bit. This is a little bit of PR, and already there are, I think, a handful of Republican senators who won't vote for Hegseth. So his nomination is probably on the skids.
Yeah, it does seem as though he's facing some real headwinds. That said, he is on a serious charm offensive and doesn't seem to be backing down. He said to the media yesterday, I answer to President Trump, who received 76 million votes and a mandate for change. I answer to the 50, the 100 senators who are part of this process and those in the committee. And I answer to my Lord and Savior and my wife and my family. So
well, I mean, those are the things he should say, but he's got the only ones there that matter are the senators, right? And whether or not they confirm him for this position. And John Tower was a senator from Texas who Ronald Reagan nominated to be the Secretary of Defense, and he was voted down because he was drinking. He was thought of as a drunk. There's precedent for this, and I don't think it's going to be a smooth ride for Hegseth. It already hasn't been, and if I were to bet on it, I would bet against Hegseth being Secretary of Defense.
I'm gonna swing around to some of this other stuff in a second, but I want to not leave the Patel nomination on the table without you at least commenting on it. I mean, he is, Kash Patel, a true firebrand for Donald Trump. I mean, he's a January 6th guy. He was part of that process, strategy, conspiracy, if you will, to overthrow the vote. And he is an unapologetic rah-rah guy for Trump. And he is also saying, and unapologetically as well, that he'll pursue prosecutions against those who are enemies of Donald Trump.
Yeah, and that's what's causing the Biden White House now to weigh preemptive pardons for all the people that are on an enemies list, right? Just pardon all those people. If this is the vengeance tour of Donald Trump and it's being handled through the wisdom of Kash Patel, then the White House that exists now, the Biden administration, has the ability to fend a lot of that off in advance. And it's, I think a lot of the people that would be on that list are uncomfortable being pardoned for something that they haven't done or been convicted of or accused of having done, but for whom they know there is a whisper campaign about them, and that there is an enemies list similar to what Nixon had when he was in the White House. And a blanket preemptive pardon would really make a lot of that stuff go away, and not everything. And I guess it would be terrible for the people that were lower on the list who don't get the blanket pardon, who aren't even being thought of just yet. Look, this is going to be a Wild West Justice Department, at least at the beginning of the term. And some people are going to come into their crosshairs. And I think it's why when you look at what's going on in the Judiciary Committee in the House and in the Oversight Committee in the House, they're easing some people out, right? I mean, you've got Jamie Raskin, who is the head of, and I know I've taken us into a little bit of a left turn here, but I think it's important because the Democrats are, they lost the election, they lost it badly, but they're not going away. And in the House, they have, as we alluded to earlier, they're almost, it's almost even. So Jamie Raskin was the chairman of the Oversight Committee. He's leaving the Oversight Committee chairmanship to run for the chairmanship of the Judiciary Committee, or the ranking member, because the Republicans have it, the ranking member, the highest ranking Democrat on that committee. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is going to be doing the same in the Oversight Committee right now. So you're going to have sort of two young firebrand, when I say young, newer to the House than Jerry Connolly, who's 74 and has been there for a long time, who's running against AOC, and Gerald Nadler, who was the chairman and then the ranking member on judiciary. So they're getting rid of some of the old guard, and they're going to go hard at the Justice Department. Oversight and judiciary are going to be very, very tough committees for the administration to get through. And I think we're seeing that a little bit too, not just the blanket pardon stuff, but on the ground, on the Hill stuff.
That's fascinating. I also feel as though those people you've mentioned, the newer crew, younger crew, as you've described them, they're also great at messaging. I feel as though so much of this game in politics is not just policy, but it's messaging on policy, and they are very good. And
they're
I'd like
very good. And there's also one element about them is that they're fearless. They don't care what people say or think about them, which is atypical for Democrats. It is something that you see that has worked to success for people like Donald Trump, like Ted Cruz. There's so many of them that don't really care what people say about them. It's an attribute. Bill Clinton was one of those people. He couldn't care less. He just plowed through and did the job. And whatever you think of Ted Cruz and Donald Trump, they have those attributes, and it has helped them in political life. I think Raskin and Ocasio-Cortez have that as well to a degree, and that's going to help them to not be afraid. Democrats, I think one of the things they've learned is to not run from a position of fear and stepping back. And there are some that would disagree with me that Democrats are going to do that. But I think this shows a correction to that.
There was a question that came in. I thought maybe you could address it. We get a little bit of it through the...
a hockey question?
It's not a hockey question. Maybe later. Kurt is asking, please ask Mr. Shure, how can they do recounts for all of these down ballot races without recounting the votes for president? Aren't all the votes on the same ballot? Can you just speak to this and the recount questions?
Election law is different, and also from state to state. Certain states, depending on the margin of difference, require that the campaign pay for it. Some are publicly funded. To recount every single ballot for every single race is not something that would be done. So, for example, you could have, let's say, the Adam Gray race and John Duarte, the one we talked about earlier in the show. That's the one in California's 13th congressional district. I think it was 175 or 195 votes that separated the two of them. They could recount that and come up with something similar, but it would be at a cost to the candidates. But they're not going to recount the Trump vote there because he won that district by a lot more than was the difference in the congressional race. So it becomes a question of cost. It becomes a question of what election law in each state says, and there are 50 different ways of doing it in all 50 states and territories and DC.
The right wing invests in communications. We need to promote left-leaning media voices at all levels of media, TikTok, and even video games. Is it true that the emerging technologies, and these have already emerged, really, but you know what I mean, the video game world, the TikTok world of social media that's so very dominant and does really influence people's thinking, leans right, and we need to kind of begin to broaden it?
I won't pretend to be able to speak for TikTok and video games. That's just not a world that I'm in. But typically, the reason that the right wins in that regard is because they have the audience that is craving that. The lack of success for liberal media speaks just as much to the people that don't really feel like they need their beliefs to be validated by someone on a TV screen or inside of a radio. And so I think that there's just a fundamental difference where the Republicans and conservatives and right-wingers like to march in lockstep. They look for people. I talked about this a lot, Mark, when I was on the road going to these Trump rallies, is that a lot of people are there for the pre-rally stuff much more than even the rally. They go for the tailgate and they don't care what happens at the game. And I think that's the type of person you're speaking to. You'll remember the beginning, the sort of godfather of all of this right-wing media was Rush Limbaugh. And a lot of people who listen to the show may know that and may not, but Rush Limbaugh used to call his people, and they wore it as a badge of honor, ditto heads, because there was something great about echoing what the great Rush Limbaugh was saying. And he knew that if he said something, they would all repeat it. That dynamic doesn't work on the left. The left isn't looking for someone to ditto. They're looking for somebody to disagree with, or they're comfortable with the beliefs they have because they feel as if they've researched them and they know them and they're okay with it and don't, would rather listen to something else. And that's not, that's a generalization, but it's proven itself in the failures of liberal media.
This as well, and I have another quick question. I don't know, to the guest, why has Gloria Allred ignored Hegseth? I don't know what Gloria Allred's deal is. She's been an activist, as is her daughter, in this world of sexual harassment in the workplace, et cetera. Thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know, and I think that it may be too early for that, right? I mean, if Hegseth does get to a confirmation hearing, that might be a voice you hear from either in the background or the foreground. I don't know.
This is Jim. Essentially, you've already addressed this. Interesting, the Senator-elect Schiff does not want a pardon because it would imply he did something wrong. You kind of spoke to that. Like, why am I getting a pardon? What, for just running a congressional committee?
Yeah. I mean, that's a high road take, but Adam Schiff certainly doesn't want to have to deal with that in his first term as a senator. And but I think he's saying the right thing. And I get the sentiment, right? I mean, why do you want to be pardoned for something you didn't do? Because it implies guilt, right? A pardon implies guilt. So I think that, as a U.S. senator, he may be able to say, don't give me a preemptive pardon. I can fight my own fight. But there's some people that are in either that are now in civilian life or in bureaucratic jobs that just don't want to deal with that and don't want to deal with the cost of defending themselves too. I mean, it's a lot of money to hire a lawyer to defend yourself against the U.S. government, and one that has a very, very clear agenda.
The House report on Matt Gaetz will stay secret.
It will.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Disappointing from a we'd all love to know standpoint, but probably good House precedent, I would guess. He's not a member of the House. That's what in the rules and regulations are. Once he's out of the House, that all gets stifled, and I don't know that there's as much as I'd like to know what the truth is there. It's not. There would be a presumption of guilt because of the findings of a body that is not a U.S. court of law, but it goes only along the rules of the U.S. House of Representatives. So I grudgingly have to agree that it's probably the best thing, but I know a lot of people that disagree with me, and I could be swayed.
It went along party lines, the vote.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not huge surprise.
It's not a surprise because if I were in Congress, I'd probably vote with the Democrats to release it because you want to know what this person did and these really unseemly things. And also it sends another message about the type of people that Donald Trump, who says only the best people, the type of people that he associates with and nominates. But in the end, I think House precedent's pretty important. That look, if you did something and you resign your seat from Congress, that is in a sense you're admitting guilt for something and you shouldn't be in the House.
In our last minute, I just wanted to visit something that I mentioned in the last hour, and that is Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk as they, take a hatchet to spending, to government. I have all kinds of issues with this, but I wonder if you could just speak to sort of the X's and O's of it because you're so good with that. That's not an official agency that they run. They will have a connection, and I think we touched on this last time you and I spoke, with Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think, is going to kind of be the person who's going to run for them in the House to kind of try to get this stuff into the House pipeline. But can you speak to sort of how their recommendations may be acted upon, what things might likely happen, and what things might likely not?
They're going to influence legislation that's put forward by the White House, and they're going to run into some problems, maybe less so in the House. But I think John Thune wants to establish that he is the last. He's going to be the majority leader in the U.S. Senate. Establish that the buck stops with him, and he's not going to just let some other people tell him how he's going to put legislation on the floor. In the House, it's going to be a little bit different, and they're going to have to visit some of those pieces of legislation that are put forward by the House. But I think that's basically what it is. And clearly, they're going to get a lot of deference. So the findings that they make and the suggestions that they make are going to be things that are heeded by the White House, and it's going to be reflected in legislation. And a lot of that legislation is going to cut spending. But again, this goes back to our, we're full circle here. You have members of the House that don't want to see, even if they're Republicans who say we have to stop spending, when it gets to their district, they say, whoa, 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 whoa. We have to stop spending in the other 434 districts, not in mine, right? And so it's going to be a little bit of a problem because voters, whether they say it or not, they like the spending when it's spent on them.
And so we wrap it up. Thank you, Michael. I want to just note, it's a program note, and it's an exciting program note, that Michael Shure will be here next week hosting this show in place of me. Yes, I know. It's give the people what they want.
I still don't have a mug, by the way, but that's another conversation.
Well, we'll get you a new mug. Yeah. And,
this is what
you'd like a substantial mug. I have to buy them off the...
If I'm hosting the show, I got to have that.
It's true. I don't know how to deal with that quickly because I'm leaving town in a couple of hours. So we may have...
Deal with it. We could go back, Albert. Let's find a show from a year and a half ago where we're dealing with my mug quickly.
Yeah, that's right. Albert can help you make the case for the fact that we keep the mugs from you. There's a chit mug, and I will get you the new white mugs. Mugs have traditionally been black, but now the new white mugs will come out, and our logo boldly emblazoned. But you're really, I think.
I'm very.
I said this before. Yeah, you're so smart. You're so funny. You're so connected to so many different things, and hockey. I mean, what could possibly be better?
And Albert and I can talk hockey together, and breaks and everything.
So to be clear, Kim will be here also. So and Kim adores you. So it's almost embarrassing how she just steps on me to get to you. But she does. She's excited about it. So we're really looking forward to and you can do Thursday also. There was a question as to whether
I'm going to be here 5 days next week.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. Michael, really do thank you and appreciate your input always, and look forward to watching next week. So thanks a lot. Michael Shure, everybody. Yeah. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.